Hello everyone, I'm your host Patrick Reiserov. Today we're going to be talking about vitamin D. For this I have David Fäh. David is a nutritionist and health scientist at the Bern Fachhochschule. So just to give you a brief overview of vitamin D is extremely important for bone health. There's some links that it can help with the immune system. So vitamin D you can get from foods, but from what I know, most of it cannot be covered by foods, and you either need to get it from the sun or by supplementing. So, David, one big question I have is that I often see people wearing clothes which cover most of their body when they're outside, or even in summer, people wear these big swimsuits which cover up most of their skin. Can we get enough vitamin D from going outside when most of our body is covered up by clothes and just our face is exposed to the sun?
Hi, Patrick. This is absolutely true. So with food, even if it's vitamin D rich food, we cannot cover our vitamin D demand entirely. So either we have to expose to the sun, because the body then builds it out of cholesterol, in fact, and there are other organs involved, but the skin is an important organ, and if we don't have sun exposure, UV exposure on the skin, we do not produce enough vitamin D, and we cannot cover our demand, and we have to supplement, in fact, vitamin D with vitamin D supplements. So first of all, it's important that you expose yourself to a certain time. So if you expose yourself in the morning or in the evening, you will likely not produce enough vitamin D, especially when it's not summertime. So when it's autumn or spring or wintertime, of course. In wintertime, you usually do not produce enough vitamin D if you are in North America or Europe, most European countries. And in summertime, if you wear this special UV protection clothes over most parts of your skin, you will also not produce enough vitamin D, even if in summertime and even if you expose yourself at noon, around noon, like 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, where it's the best time for UV radiation helping to produce vitamin D. And the skin is also not enough, so you need a certain area of the skin being radiated by UV. So skin is not enough, hands are not enough, so also in wintertime, even if the sun would be high enough on the sky, you would not produce enough just by exposing your face and your hands. Now, the other question is, what about other clothes, like cotton clothes? There it depends on the color, and on the density of the texture. There might be some production, but it could be that it's not enough. So UV protection, specialized clothes that you use, that some people use for having a swim. It certainly blocks the UV radiation to a very large extent, and it's not enough. So, and like a normal T-shirt, it depends on the texture and the color of the T-shirt. Now, the question is, what about sunscreen? And for a while, it was postulated that sunscreen, like protection factor 50 or plus, so sun blocker, that it would also completely block vitamin D production, endogenous vitamin D production, which is not true. In fact, you can still produce vitamin D even if you use a very high protection. And this protection protects you against the problematic UV radiation, UVA radiation, that is responsible for skin aging and also potentially for degradation of DNA and destruction of DNA, and therewith also for the risk of some types of skin cancers. And it does not completely block the UVB radiation, which is important for vitamin D production. So, to answer your question, UV protection clothes, they block vitamin D production. Normal cotton clothes, when they're not too thick, they may allow, to a certain extent, UV radiation coming on the skin, but it might be not enough. And sunscreen still allows vitamin D, endogenous vitamin D production, meaning that if you wear these clothes, you more likely would be necessary to use supplements, vitamin D supplements, and for sunscreen, even if it's high protection, if you expose at noon during let's say summertime or the largest part of the year, not in the winter half year, then you would most likely produce enough vitamin D and would not really need supplements while you are exposing.
Okay, so the noon time is generally the best time to get the sun.
Yes, exactly. For example, before 11 o'clock, even at summertime, and after, let's say, 3, 4 o'clock, the vitamin D production is much, much lower than at noontime. So the sun has to be quite high, the UV, so the angle should not be too flat. This is an important factor that this is it for whether you produce enough vitamin D or not.
Okay, interesting, because my dad, he always said it's best to go out very early in the morning when the sun is rising or during the evening, because you have less chance of getting like sunburn. And
yes, this is true, but at the same time you have of course a lower intensity. So for skin protection, your dad was absolutely true, but you would likely not produce enough vitamin D.
Okay, and what about if I go out wearing like a t-shirt, for example, where my wrists are exposed? Because I've heard some of my friends, they say that your wrists are the most sensitive parts for making vitamin D.
I'm not sure whether there are more or less sensitive parts. As far as I know from the literature, just the area plays a role. So the larger the area, the more vitamin D you produce. The area exposed, and just the wrist is certainly not enough from the area. And I'm not sure, I cannot really believe that the wrist might be. Maybe when the skin is bright, so you don't have a lot of melanin in the skin, then you might produce more. So if you expose like a bright part of your skin, then you might produce more vitamin D. But otherwise, I cannot imagine that there are like specific parts of the skin on your body that are more sensitive and more appropriate for vitamin D production. What is true, what we know is that with increasing age, you produce less vitamin D. So you might have to expose more often, which is a little bit at odds with skin protection and cancer risk, which also increases with increasing age. And secondly, people with obesity, they have lower vitamin D levels for the same exposure than normal weight people. We don't really know exactly why. Maybe they generally expose less because of their overweight obesity to sunlight. But maybe also the excess fat mass plays a role, since vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and there are some theories saying that the vitamin D is then captured into the adipocytes, the fat cells, more frequently than in normal weight people. We don't know exactly, but what is known is that obese people have lower, in general, lower vitamin D levels than normal weight people.
Okay, because that brings me to my next question, because some people I've heard are also saying you should eat more fat, more cholesterol to be able to produce more vitamin D. So,
Yes, I mean, the cholesterol is a very important fat structure, in fact. It's a substance which the body uses not only for the production of vitamin D, but also for the production of a lot of hormones like um, uh, and anabolic steroids, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, but also aldosterone, which regulates the body fluid, um, and also for the production of vitamin D. Cholesterol is important. In fact, the structure of vitamin D looks quite similar. So it has like a steroid structure coming from cholesterol. Now, because cholesterol is so important, the body is not um, um, dependent on cholesterol coming from food. So even, I mean, what you say, this would mean that vegan people, they would in fact have like vitamin D, much stronger vitamin D deficiency, which is somehow true. They have a bit lower vitamin D levels, but this is just because animal sources are very important, vitamin D sources, although you cannot cover your entire demand. So even vegan people can have normal vitamin D levels if if they're young, not obese, they expose themselves during reasonable time to sunlight, because the body can produce the cholesterol himself. So we are not dependent from cholesterol from food. So even vegan people, so vegan diet does not contain cholesterol. They can, they do not necessarily need vitamin D supplements. So cholesterol is now the first structure. Then the liver is participates in vitamin D production, the skin, as I explained, and also the kidneys are very important. So the last hydroxylation of vitamin D on the carbon atom number 25 occurs in the kidney. So if you have like kidney problems, kidney failures, you likely also have like too low vitamin D levels, and you might have to supplement vitamin D. So this is not true that you have to eat a lot of cholesterol and fatty animal food in order to produce enough vitamin D, because our liver can produce it itself, because it's so important.
interesting, because I've read that every cell makes cholesterol in the body. Is this something you know, or?
I'm not quite sure about that. It would astonish me a bit if it was like this. Usually, the liver is the organ which has enough enzymes to produce all these structures. So I would doubt this a bit. What might be true is that most cells are able to store cholesterol because it's so important. But to produce, I would doubt it. I would say the liver is most likely the only organ which is able to do that.
Okay, and I think cholesterol also is in part of like the cell membranes. So this
Exactly. So it has also a structure, not only a functional role in the body, also a structural role. So it's a very important molecule. And the body regulates it in that if we eat very small amounts of cholesterol, the endogenous production is increased, and vice versa. When we eat huge amounts of cholesterol, then the endogenous production is decreased. Explaining why when you start to eat like 3 to 4 eggs a day, your cholesterol levels may rise at the beginning, and they may tend to decrease over time because the endogenous production would be downregulated.
you froze a little bit. Could you repeat the last two sentences on my end? Yeah.
So this explains why people who start to eat like 4 eggs a day and did not eat any eggs a day before, they likely have at the beginning increased cholesterol levels, which then decrease because the body lowers the endogenous cholesterol production. So cholesterol production is downregulated when the exogenous cholesterol intake increases.
Okay. And you talked about this cholesterol making anabolic steroids, such as you mentioned also testosterone, for example. So are there any of these hormones which vegans are deficient in, such as testosterone or?
They might, yes, vegans might have lower levels of testosterone, but this is not due to the fact that the vegan diet does not contain cholesterol. There might be other reasons. For example, testosterone is dependent from the muscle mass, and the muscle mass might be a little bit lower in vegan people because of the protein amount and quality might be lower in a vegan diet. And the other reason might be that animal products may contain these anabolic hormones, which is, I would say, rather a disadvantage than an advantage because it's used to make animals grow faster and build up more muscle mass. So it's used by the agriculture. And since these fat-soluble substances are resistant to the acid in the stomach, they may also enter in our body if we eat a lot of, especially animal products rich in fat, like sausages or like pork meat, which is rich in fat. Then we might have like an intake of these hormones via animal food, which vegan people do not have. So this might be the explanation why, but not the cholesterol in my eyes.
And what could be the negative impacts of these hormones entering the body?
So we don't know exactly, but as the name says, these hormones are anabolic, so they have anabolic properties. So they lead to a higher cell proliferation rate. And always when cells proliferate, you also have like a DNA replication. And with each replication, there may be mutations. And mutations may be the beginning of the cancer development. And also for the liver, we know that people like misusing, like bodybuilders, these steroids, the liver suffers a lot with fatty liver disease, liver inflammation, because the liver also has to degrade these hormones in order to limit the impact of the hormones on our body.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for your answers, David.
Welcome, pleasure.
So to summarize, for people that go out in the winter time just wearing a coat and clothes, even if they're walking around with some sun in the winter, they should still take a supplement, I'm guessing.
When they want to avoid like low levels of vitamin D, yes. The other questions which we'll discuss later on is whether these low levels of vitamin D are really problematic for health. So this is another question. If you believe that, then yes, you should take supplements, vitamin D supplements in wintertime.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll speak to you a bit later about the problems of these low levels and if giving boluses can help so large amounts of vitamin D to people.
Exactly. Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Patrick.
See you soon. Bye.